Hello guys, I'm Tristan Lambert, and today I'm going to be telling a scary story called Big Tim. Big Tim is an absolutely terrifying, big and large mythical being that has existed for an unknown amount of time. Big Tim is feared across the world. That is because if you happen to spot him in the distance, then it is already too late. He will charge at you and kill you, and you will be his next victim. Big Tim has powers and a stature that resembles a mixture between girth god and sex god. Big Tim is extremely big and tall, so big and tall in fact that its true size has never been identified by scientists, no matter how hard they try. Big Tim also has an extremely large penis, which its size is also unknown because it's so huge. Big Tim is immune to almost anything, including nuclear missiles, because he is so huge. What is certain, however, is that Big Tim is not a god, and he is not immune to the power of girth, which, as you know, is discharged from girth god himself. Big Tim can kill you in many different ways, and I'm going to list them now. Big Tim can kill you by smashing your nan's back door in, and then by smashing your nan's back doors in. After he's finished with your nan, he will then come to you and do the exact same thing. Although you may think this is pleasurable, it is actually an extremely painful way to die. Big Tim can kill you by simply walking up to you and smacking your head clean off with his bare hand. Your head will eventually land somewhere near Big Tim, and he will do one of three things with it. Number 1. Big Tim may swallow your head whole in a weird fashion. Number 2. Big Tim may crush your head in his bare hands. And number 3. Big Tim may take your head home and store it as a trophy-like item. Big Tim can kill you by chest puffing you into oblivion. And if you don't know what that is, it's basically when you chest bump someone so hard that they simply die on the spot. Big Tim, however, takes this to the next level, with his chest bump being so hard that it simply obliterates you instantly. Big Tim can kill you by giving you a cheeky handshake of death. And if you don't know what that is, it's where you shake someone's hand and then shoulder bump them as hard as you can. Big Tim also takes this to the next level by shoulder bumping you so hard that you simply get thrown so far into space that you're now outside the multiverse, where you're never seen again. Big Tim can kill you by getting his huge dong out. Once he has his dong out, there's actually 2 ways that Big Tim can kill you by using his huge dong. Number 1 is by whacking you to death with it, and number 2 is by forcefully shoving it down your throat until you choke to death and literally explode due to extreme pressure. Big Tim can kill you by wanking his cock so hard that he spaffs out a huge spunkanami, which will kill anything in its path. A spunkanami is simply a more powerful tsunami created by Big Tim's essence of youth. Big Tim can kill you by smacking your arse on the cheeks and inside the anus until you die a painful death. This is considered one of the worst ways to be killed by Big Tim. Big Tim has also been known to shove inanimate objects through the anus as well. This isn't the same as Big Tim smashing your back doors in, as he usually doesn't have his willy out when killing his victims in this fashion. The final way that Big Tim can kill you is by simply standing up if you happen to spot him in the distance when he is sitting or lying down. When he stands up, it sends a shock of fear so great through your body that you simply just die instantly on the spot. He allegedly once stood up in front of a large crowd and they all died instantly on the spot. Some of them even vaporized completely. The reason that people simply die by him setting up is unknown, although scientists across the world believe it's got something to do with the fact that he's so big and tall. Big Tim sometimes will shit on it, where he will crouch down and shit out a huge brick of poo, which causes extreme amounts of damage. Despite Big Tim being such a scary big being, there are people that have claimed to have survived Big Tim before, and here are some of their stories. The first story comes from a 69-year-old man in 1969. He was in China one day doing some Chinese things when, in the distance, he claimed he saw some kind of big and tall being that appeared to have a larger bulge than usual. Upon closer inspection, he realised that it was Big Tim. Big Tim then notices the man, and upon noticing him, smacks a random person's head clean off, and then proceeds to give the man an alpha stare. The alpha stare scared the poor man so much that he ran away so far that he ran all the way out of China, never to return again. The second story comes from a 69-year-old woman in 1969. She was in England one day on some sort of Nandem bender when, in the distance, she claimed she saw some kind of big and tall being with a large bulge. From the bulge alone, she already knew that it was Big Tim. Big Tim then charges towards one of the Nandem members and smashes her back doors in. The 69-year-old woman can only watch in horror as she watches her friend scream as she gets pounded to death by Big Tim. Turns out he already smashed her dead nan's back door and back doors in the local cemetery before coming for her and smashing her back door and back doors in as well. The death of her friend scared the woman so much that she ran so far that she left England, never to return again. The third story comes from a 41-year-old man in 2012. He was in Germany one day plotting the next Reich when, in the distance, he claimed he saw some kind of large being. Upon seeing this being, the man already knew that it was Big Tim from his sheer size alone. Big Tim then proceeded to charge at the poor man, pounce on him, and then began to smack his arse on the cheeks and inside the anus. Big Tim then proceeded to forcefully shove a pen-like object through the poor man's anus, causing him to scream in pain and pass out. Thinking the man was dead, Big Tim got up and left the scene. The man eventually woke up, however, and was so traumatized by the experience that he ran out of Germany, never to return again. The fourth story comes from a 21-year-old woman in 2017. She was in France one day doing some sort of fashion show with a bunch of her friends when, in the distance, she claimed she saw some kind of tall being with a huge bulge. The sight of the bulge scared her so much that she and her friends began to run away. However, they were not quick enough for Big Tim, who proceeded to charge at one of the woman's friends and forcefully shove his cock down her throat. Eventually, the poor woman's friend's head exploded in a massive spunk explosion, killing her on the spot. The sight of her friend dying scared the woman so much that she decided to run away so far that she left France, never to return again. The fifth story comes from a 20-year-old man in 1968. He was in Italy one day when, in the distance, he claimed he saw some kind of big being sitting in a large chair. The sight of a being in the large chair scared the man, so he kept his distance, which ultimately saved his life. The being then stood up, and once the being was standing, everyone in front of the man died instantly on the spot, After seeing everyone die in front of him, the man knew that the being was in fact Big Tim, and he knew he had to run away before he died as well, and so he did, all the way out of Italy in fact, never to return again. The sixth story comes from a 39-year-old woman in 2008. She was in New York one day looking out of a window when, in the distance, she claimed she saw some kind of massive being in the ocean. The being then proceeded to whip it out and wank into the ocean, causing a massive spunking army, which was so powerful that it utterly destroyed all of New York City. The woman somehow survived by swimming away from New York, never to return again. New York eventually repaired itself within a few business days. The seventh story comes from a 47-year-old man in 2007. He was in a conference meeting one day when, in the doorway, he claimed he saw some kind of big man, bigger than any big man he's ever seen before. The big man then walked into the room and gave the boss of the conference meeting a cheeky handshake. The cheeky handshake was so powerful that it sent the boss flying out the window and into space, never to be seen again. Upon seeing this, the man knew that the big man was in fact Big Tim, and upon realising this, ran out the room, never to return to that conference meeting again. Rumours are that the boss is still floating somewhere outside the multiverse to this day. The eighth story comes from a 33-year-old woman in 1367. She was in some sort of church when, at the back of the church, she claimed she saw some kind of large man, larger than any large man she's ever seen before. The large man then proceeded to walk up to the priest and chest bump him so hard that he was sent flying across the room, causing him to be killed and obliterated instantly. The sight of the priest dying scared everyone, including the woman, so much that they all ran out the church, never to return again. The ninth and final story comes from a 24-year-old non-binary gender fluid being in 2020. This is what they had to say. I was in some kind of house self-isolating myself from a C-19 virus going around at the moment, when, in the distance, I claimed I saw some kind of mythical being which was squatting down with its cock, bollocks and arse out. It then proceeded to shit on it by shitting out a huge brick of poo, which completely destroyed a house over there. After seeing this, I knew that it was Big Tim, and I knew I had to run away. So despite the warnings, I ran outside my house, never to return again. All these people were lucky that they got away from Big Tim and didn't become his next victim. Overall, Big Tim is a relatively easy being to avoid, as he doesn't usually go around killing people, as he usually can't be asked to due to his large size. However, when he does decide to kill people, he will always succeed, as there is no way of getting away from him, and if he decides to choose you as its next victim, then you will be his next victim. So, that was Big Tim. So if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a like, and don't forget to subscribe, and goodbye, and I will see you in the next video.